So we're here, we're gathered on Zoom, organized by Rachel. Thank you very much, Rachel, to discuss an exhibition of the work of Alexander Calder at the Museum of Modern Art. And on this occasion, we are privileged to be joined by Joel Shapiro, the eminent American sculptor. Thank you, Joel, for doing this.
You're very welcome.
And also Jock Ireland, as usual, and Brant Jensu will be joining us as well. So Alexander Calder, born in 1898, died in 1976. One of the most honored, respected, highly regarded American sculptors of forever, I guess. I found this exhibition to be something of a revelation, and I'll say more about that later on. I want to hear from other people. Joel, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, you know, I've always thought the work was phenomenal. And I guess what really interests me about Calder's is the way the work touches down, the way the work is conceived, that it somehow, you know, you don't have a real sense of struggle. At least I don't see that in the work. I mean, which I admire in the work. I mean, it just seems to come from some other place. And it's not determined by architecture. It's not determined by, although it uses planes, it's not determined by the floor, the table, or the wall. I mean, of course, he uses the ceiling and he uses the wall and he uses the ground, but it doesn't seem to be a determining factor in the way the form is generated. It seems to be much more interior. You know, maybe, I know this sounds crazy, but I think yes, well, maybe that's something sort of the way Degas made sculpture versus Rodin, who's so ponderous and heavy. At least for me, I think he's great, but it is sort of always justified and so burdened by ego. And I think Calder seems to avoid all that. You know, but he's not building he's not interested in monuments.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems like a very modern contemporary artist, although now we're getting a flood of monuments. It's just about whatever he does that engages his mind, whatever, you know, and that's it. And he makes it larger and it's engaging. I mean, for me anyway, I mean, I don't think it's grandiose at all. Lots of artists, you know, a lot of sculpture is. It has to be great. It has to be necessary. It has to be meaningful. I don't think these are things he's questioning. I mean, they're there. It has those qualities.
Mm.
Ponderous and, you know, sort of trying to be great and trying to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's nice to hear, and I can see that and I can sense that. At the same time, I found the way the work didn't seem to kind of like engage gravity, engage space, engage structure. That it seemed to have a kind of underlying whimsy.
Yeah,
that I found. I ended up feeling irritated.
Oh, you irritated by it?
Somewhat, yeah. And I mean, I'd never thought before that there was a kind of connection with a kind of surrealist sort of temperament there.
I think it's all mental. I mean, I think it's sort of a projection of thought. I don't know, somehow he tinkered away, made a form, made it larger, but it seems as if it comes from this other world, the world of the mind. It's not.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you, and I mean that's clearly the case. What interested me was when Rachel put out the video that we're looking at now. I began to kind of try to reevaluate the work because it looked much better in the photographs than I have found it being present with it in the gallery.
Well, that's interesting. Well, that's always I mean, that's a common, not with Calder, but I mean, there are lots of things that I think usually if they photograph well, then I don't like them.
Because I mean, I guess
Not the case.
something to do with the work being so much about silhouette.
Yeah, I mean, they're not, muscular. The musculature in Calder is the mechanical, the machine aspect. So like in the next room, where they have those things where the machine almost dominates the form,
Yeah.
the form moving, and a massive amount of mechanism.
Mhm.
Those for me were the least successful, but they kind of, I mean, the difference between Smith and Calder, who I think are interesting to compare, that Smith always struggles for the work. It's always his body and his weight, building the form from the ground up. Very Rodin-like, where Calder just sticks this stuff out. Having grown up in New York and going to the Museum of Modern Art as a kid, I actually took a course there, believe it or not. Calder was this fact of life. I mean, it was just something. He was the artist, right? He was the modern sculptor.
Yeah, that's why I found myself kind of like, wondering why is he so admired? There's clearly, at least within the work in this show, always, not always, but often, especially in those stables in the big room, the kind of, by putting these like heads on them, there's a way to make them accessible. That doesn't remove them to, unless you think of them as somehow I mean, you see, I don't get it. I mean, it's like they're turned into alien creatures or something.
Well, they remind me of
I mean,
the kind of vestigial heads in a lot of Moores reclining figures.
yeah, the giveaways.
Yeah, and they kind of
They become a sign that tells you, this is something you can how to engage it. It's
yeah,
it's a something or other,
and work against the kind of the core form that they're appended to.
Well, I don't know. They do. You see, I mean, they give you a way of engaging the core form that they're engaged, that they're attached.
But by being there, they almost say they act as a kind of a siphon.
But they're not. You see, they're not added as an afterthought. They are central to what it is he's doing, I think. And that is not something I can.
Frivolous? I don't. You're not joyful. Not about a kind of moment of rapture, and he finds a form that he really likes.
Oh boy, a moment of rapture. Wow.
But I think in this particular batch, it seems to have more than that than the other stables. That's like the one at Storm King is really far out. I mean, it's very powerful, and it doesn't have that depictive reference to something that would.
The one at Lincoln Center is really good too.
Yeah. I mean, so this is just this is a really small, teeny show compared to the body of work.
Yeah, but this is what we're discussing, isn't it? It's the
You're correct. You're correct.
We have to come to some. I'm talking about my experience in this show, and I agree. I have seen big pieces by Calder out in the world that are definitely of another order than what I sensed in this show. But I haven't looked at them again since seeing this show. So
Okay, so you're really specific about the show. Well, I noticed those things could be annoying, but, they don't,
Yeah, you're willing to overlook them.
the overwhelming sense of the work doesn't do. See, this one's reference to dance and Martha Grahamish kind of gesture. I found that troubling,
Uh-huh.
but I find reference in my own work troubling. Why wouldn't I find it in his? I mean,
The lack of a kind of engagement with gravity, even though, he's actually literally dealing with gravity in a lot of the work. It doesn't, the sense of weightlessness or weightiness
Mm.
didn't come across to me.
Doesn't have the sense of weightlessness or.
No, I didn't feel it.
I admire that. I think that's an achievement. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm not talking about the depictive work. I mean, there's lots of Calder I don't like, but I mean, I'm talking about like any artist, there's a body of work.
There's an essay by Italo Calvino
Yeah.
on lightness. And he begins saying, I have tried to remove weight from human figures, from celestial bodies, from city. I can read a thing from the Calvino essay that I hope that what I have said so far shows that there is a lightness that is thoughtful and that is different from the frivolous lightness we all know. Indeed, thoughtful lightness can make frivolity seem heavy and opaque. Maybe that's not worth thinking about, but I have enjoyed that Calvino essay.
But I'm not quite sure what Jock is implying with those Calvino comments. Is the lightness in Calder, the kind of lightness that makes frivolity seem heavy?
The point is that the lightness and the heaviness mix in complex ways in different pieces by each sculptor. But this idea of lightness and heaviness for sculpture in general is a big deal. And it's great that you're troubled by it.
I mean, I'm not sure I was troubled by lightness. I was troubled by absence of a sense that the lightness, the lightness was a product of a certain kind of failure to engage both the feeling for the space within the parts of the work and a feeling for the way gravity was operating within the work. Those were the things that I felt that he had not engaged. And listening to Joe, I get the sense that was an achievement. I mean, I did feel very much his hands-on making, was something I did appreciate. The sense in which you could feel him twisting the wire or tightening the bolts and painting the thing. There was a kind of a real sense of his physical engagement in the production.
Yeah, his physical engagement, and with sculpture as an abstract thing, volume in space, putting those little shapes into space, and each move given a kind of attention that you feel. His sort of technique works magically for kind of some or many pieces, but sometimes it falls flat.
I'm still kind of caught up on the idea that it was deliberate. that he has actually, emotionally matured and felt pain, felt sadness, felt horror, felt
Oh, yeah.
and somehow that has cut that out of his engagement in the studio. I don't think it's possible.
You mean it isn't possible to disengage it, or it isn't?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I think some of his emotional landscape is there by implication. That, I mean, it's almost as if the absence suggests presence. I think there's a lot of things he went round, and I think he quite deliberately, decided to be brave. There were experiences in his biography that were tough and difficult and insoluble, things that he had to kind of manage and live out. And I think the cliche in this case is really true. There's a lot of Oedipal conflict. I think there's a lot of energy, a lot of mental energy went into establishing his work vis-a-vis his father and his father's assumptions. He said something at one point about traditional sculpture being the piles of mud on the floor, and I think it's a light remark that carries a lot of perspective, a lot of emotional weight.
Yeah.
It's a very, it's a very decided move that he executed with, I think, with like great kind of power. The physical power is not perfectly evident because the material is spare, the means are very economical.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting is that what I'm complaining about or finding wanting is a deliberate rejection. See, I mean, looking at these images now, I really think I'm talking a lot of nonsense because they look so kind of gorgeous. I mean, but this is photographs.
Yeah, but I think they're much better in the space than in the photographs.
Yeah, well,
I thought it was this magical room.
huh.
And monochrome.
Yeah, no, I thought it in the way it reached out and how he conjured up those forms.
Yeah.
I mean, what brain where did it come from? And face it, I mean, as corny as it is, he did get sculpture off the ground. I mean, people always think removing sculpture from the base is nothing. This guy projected sculpture into space. Other people have done it. But I mean, somehow, I think it's a huge achievement. And
Yeah.
there's a decorative, frivolous aspect to certain work. I wouldn't say frivolous. They're little I mean, that's what work isn't, of its time, and what work doesn't reflect kind of vogue of its time, which frequently can be, it just seems to me that's always in every body of work. I mean, Brancusi is, a great stylist, but
Yeah.
looks like it's just another piece of Art Deco. I mean, it's great, but I mean, it has all the attributes of that period. And I think this has all the attributes of that kind of mid-century modernism. But it's utilized in such a brilliant way.
That one I liked.
You do,
Yeah.
that's like an Oran or something.
Yeah.
Well, that one has more density, at least in the photograph. You read it as more solidity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like the lack of solidity. I mean, I admire it. And that they're so active in the space.
this piece that's on screen now is the first Stabile.
Really?
Yep, the very first. And he made it in, well, I'm not sure how it was fabricated, but he was working out of a storefront in the Upper East Side at that point.
What year?
God, I don't remember the date. I think it's is it shit, I don't remember now. I should know. It's 40s, I think.
But post-war. Post-World War II.
Yeah, it must be because it was not in the, I don't think it was in that first MoMA retrospective. I could be wrong on that. But I noticed that it was made in pieces that would go through an ordinary doorway, and then it, you know, bolts together into something larger.
Yeah, you wonder whether that kind of constraint was a plus or a minus. There's there's a kind of awkwardness about that particular piece that I enjoyed. Unlike unlike some of the others. There was an awkwardness about that one, and there was an awkwardness about that other piece that Joel said had some density to it that I thought was kind of very reminiscent of some art things. But yeah, it emphasizes the sense in which they operate very much through silhouette, don't they? I mean, they're continually changing silhouettes.
Yeah, they're black too, and you know, not a frivolous color.
The other thing about black is the spatial ambiguity. That when things overlap, you know, they can appear solid or appear to be a single shape when they're, you know, two or three connected by a fold or a gusset.
What about the constellations, which I thought were just so great?
Yeah.
I don't like that they were hung very high.
I would guess they're hung at a specified height. I think they were made for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, two of those were lent by the foundation, and the third is museum collection.
You seem to be very taken with those, Brent.
Yeah, I love them.
Oh, I think they're great.
Yeah, somebody say some more.
Each form, there's some density in these. Each form is fairly pregnant, I think, loaded with meaning and reference, and they're not silhouettes, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, they're very Giacometti-ish too, right? I mean, that kind of abstraction. But I think they're so great.
Imagine those at some monumental scale.
They're hanging from one point. So
Yeah, like a picture.
Yeah, there's one picture frame, right?
Yeah.
And they've held up well. These are what, 42 or something?
Oh, wow. Why don't I remember that?
Lousy with dates.
They're fairly early, I seem to recall.
40s, yeah. Yeah, they're wartime.
Right, I thought they were wartime.
They give you this kind of disorienting feeling of having traded the floor for the wall.
Yeah, and there's great scale. Little bead next to a big. I think they're just great.
Yeah.
They're so unpredictable. But
Yeah, these are really strange things, and you know, seem to be almost in some way feel, you know, quite different in a way from a lot of the other stuff in this show. That oddness I found intriguing. you know, I make head or tail of them really, which I liked, you know, and I wondered about them being made during the war, which think I thought they were. I think they are.
Yeah.
And whether that was something, you know, that I mean, that was a connection that I valued. I thought, you know, that.
Where was Hitler during the war? Frank, do you know?
What's that?
Where was he during the war?
Here. He and Louisa saw it coming and got out.
Okay.
I was impressed by the portrait, the wire portrait busts.
Which one?
The wire portraits.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. They're really, you know, really good likenesses and good characterizations. And, you know, I mean, so economical. Calder's economy is really impressive to me. That's one of those things that seems a sure indication of high intelligence.
Well, he's clearly highly intelligent. So, I mean, anybody makes a body work right now.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, these portraits are brilliant, and on the other hand, they are clever.
Yeah, that's true.
Also, it's been the exercise that every student in every sculpture class does. At least when I went to high school,
Yeah.
made wire portraits. You know.
Huh.
I saw some drawings. These are Josephine Baker.
Yeah.
They're a little cliched. I mean, his jewelry is phenomenal.
I don't understand Calder's obsession with the meander and the spiral.
You don't understand it?
No, I don't get it. They were just, it's almost like involuntary reflex responses for him.
But don't you think that was a way of making a three-dimensional form?
Yeah, yeah.
Breast and a belly, and you know.
But I mean, he resorts to it constantly in drawings too, or
Yeah, but it's a way of creating a volume, which he can't. Most of his volumes are between, you know, the material. Like he engages, you know, he engages a space with having two walls or whatever it is. So with the wire, he actually creates a three-dimensional kind of cup or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's the practical use, but the spiral is some kind of symbol, isn't it, that he seems to be attached to?
That was interesting, this one.
Yeah, this one looks good in the photographs. I don't know why it needs this white.
What does that screen do anything? Is there some?
For me, I mean, it supposedly frames it in some way, but it seemed to be quite redundant as far as I was concerned. I mean, had it been a different color, it might have done something.
I think there's a certain witticism there about painting, about the condition of painting and the spatial metaphor of painting, the unliteral space of painting.
What about, I think that's a good one. What about the driftwood piece? Was that driftwood?
Yeah, I looked forward to seeing that. It's the first time I'd seen it. Knew it only by photographs. I think, you know what I think it is? It's called Apple Monster. I have a feeling it's the root of an apple sapling.
Really? Here, I mean, listen, that was, yeah, Greenberg thought he was too tasteful.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think it's wild stuff.
What do you like about the jewelry, Joel?
Oh, I just think, you know, I've made little efforts to make jewelry now. And I mean, I think I thought if I actually managed to put a piece of wire and attach it, that was an achievement. First thing, I think it looks great on people. It's very individual and very strong. It's a kind of achievement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I find it decorative. I don't even know if it's decorative. It's also so rational. You know, I mean, so kind of, he understands structure so well. I think-
Okay, okay.
My neighbor in the country grew up with Calder.
Uh-huh.
Huh.
He was the next door neighbor. Her father was Elliot Noyes. So somehow, you know, she's interesting in terms of the Calders. I haven't really probed too much, but she has a considerable amount of jewelry, and each thing is really beautiful.
Hmm.
They're not beautiful. I just think they have this strong presence. I think
Yeah.
he's so haptic. You know, his hand is there.
Yeah.
He's so intelligent. So this is a guy who really has a big brain and understands structure, and is, I think he's quite a good craftsman. And you sense that when you see the form, and it's not decorative the way most jewelry is. But it's definitely of a period, and I think Calder's of a period, and I think that, so when you have difficulty with, you know, a reference to, you know, when it looks like has some corny element, I just think that's part of the time. Anyway, listen, I have to go, because I gotta,
Thank you, Joel. Thank you very much. And really,
it's not time.
really appreciate your
Okay, it was fun.
Well,
It's
we'll do it again.
interesting to hear everybody's point of view.
Okay. Thanks again.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Thank you, everybody.